Yeah, so welcome to our first Parent Conversation Club. And my name is Kim Tackerberry, and I am the founder of GLOW. And GLOW stands for Girls Leading Others Wisely. We are an 8-week girls leadership program that offers curriculum for girls to gather as a club or gather after school and investigate and explore different themes. So there's time offered for conversation and some discussions about eating nutritious snacks and food. And then we end every session with exposure to different fitness activities. So we are going today, and for our series moving forward, we're going to focus on parent sessions. So this one is entitled Understanding the Female Adolescent Brain. And I am pretty excited to share a little bit about our speaker for this session. And sorry, I'm going to go in here and get the link. And this is where I haven't got everything up. Here we go. Jill Mitchell has been a teacher for 18 years and most recently a health and wellness coach for her school division. Currently on a professional improvement leave, Jill is working on her master's in supporting children's mental health and working on a project entitled Thrive with Calgary Connect Charter School and Calgary Arts Academy. Jill is also happily married with two beautiful girls herself, aged 12 and 15, who are her biggest inspiration in this work. So I am going to turn things over to Jill. So what we'll do is Jill's going to share some content. Following that, we have a Padlet that I'll post in the chat, but I'll also send out with the recording with opportunities to share some of your wonderings, some different topics that perhaps that you want to let us know in the future that we could offer as part of our Parent Conversation Club. So Jill, I'm going to turn things over to you, and thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. So, yeah, we're going to chat about understanding the female adolescent brain, which is very similar to the male adolescent brain. Something that may be different is that females often will hit puberty earlier. So, I'm noticing with my 12-year-old, she's already in this adolescent stage where a lot of her male counterparts are not. So, it is a conversation club. So, I'm really open to just keeping it informal. If anyone has questions or wonderings or comments, please feel free to share them. But I will just get going because our time is fairly short. So a little bit about me and why I'm here. So like Kim had mentioned, I have been a teacher for quite a long time, almost 20 years, which I love. And most recently, I've got to do some health and wellness work in my school division, which was really incredible. And now I'm on a professional improvement leave while I work on getting my master's in helping kids with mental health. So that's kind of professionally why I'm here, but I think even more importantly is personally why I'm here. So I am in the midst of this teenage stage, this female adolescent brain. So those are my girls, Maya and Addie, who are 12 and 15. And I put a picture of them when they were younger in there, just because I remember when they were little and when I was pregnant, and I would read all of the books to figure out how to be the best parent I could be, and did a lot of research into that. And then we were cruising along for a while, and then adolescence hit. And I was like, where is the manual for this? And there isn't one. I wish I could just pass that on tonight, but there is a lot of amazing things that are happening. And so that's kind of what got me interested in learning about this. Was not necessarily professionally because I work usually with younger kids, but as a mom, trying to figure out what was going on with these little angels. So I just wanted to do a quick check-in. I think we have just a little group here tonight, but which sheep describes how you feel about parenting a preteen or teenage girl? So if you want to just pop that in the chat, feel free to do that. And in any given day, I could be like all of those numbers. But overall, what would you consider yourself? Which number? 8. Yeah. Awesome. Okay, I'm gonna keep cruising. Again, I would love this could be a really great conversation that we could have if we had more time, but just something I want you to think about before we really dig into this. But what preconceived ideas do you already have about adolescence? So I know prior to learning a little bit more, I definitely thought that they were just hormonal crazy monsters and that it was just hormones that were leading all of their decisions. But I've learned a little bit more than that, but what comes to your mind when you think of adolescence? So I wanted to just share, this article really kind of changed my mindset around teenage brains. So imagine you're asleep in bed and the light begins to come in through your window. Your father comes into your room, kisses you gently on the forehead, and says, "Good morning, sweetie. What would you like for breakfast?" "I'd like some oatmeal," you say. 30 minutes later, you come down dressed and you have your steaming bowl of oatmeal. That's the way it is in childhood for many of us when we are looked after by our parents or other caregivers. Now, why would you ever give that up? Your mind would have to change in a way that drove you away from your dad's oatmeal. That's why we have adolescence. Nature needs to do something to this child's brain to make it so that when this child is 50 years old, they're not living at home anymore. Nature's got to do something so that that child will move away from the familiar and towards what's unfamiliar and new, and sometimes towards what's potentially unsafe. The key lies in the oatmeal, or rather, who we turn to for the oatmeal. The adolescent brain transforms our relationships so that we no longer look to parents or caregivers alone for our oatmeal. Instead, we also look to our friends and to society. So, how does nature do that? Well, the adolescent brain goes through a lot of changes, which is what we're going to dig into a little bit tonight. So, this is a really great video. And I just love this. For me, it's been just kind of a mind shift when I think about parenting adolescents. It was something I kind of was fearing when they were a little bit younger and thinking it was like, "Oh, just gotta get them through those adolescent years." But it actually is a really incredible stage, and as parents, we get front row for that. So I wanna show this video to you, let me know if there's any issues, but Dr. Dan Siegel can explain this far easier than I can and in a shorter time. So I'm gonna share this video and then, we'll dig into a little bit of what he has to say. Sound okay?
Mhm. Perfect.
Adolescent period is absolutely amazing. People often give it a negative approach, saying, oh, it's a time where adolescents are going to lose their mind, or they're just immature, or raging hormones drive them crazy. These are all not only wrong, but they're myths that mislead us and actually disempower us. Whether we're adults or adolescents, they actually give us the wrong message and they make it so there's nothing we can do. So, what is actually the truth? The truth is that instead of raging hormones, what's happening is we have remodeling in the brain in ways we never could have predicted. We now understand two big things are happening in the brain, things you as an adult can support adolescents in developing well. And if you're an adolescent, you actually can use this to help your brain grow in an optimal way. What are those two things? The brain is pruning itself. So imagine that in childhood, you're growing like a tree and establishing all these branches and all these leaves are growing. In the brain, that means connections among the basic cell, the neuron, called synapses, are being established. And you're soaking in the knowledge of the world. And that's beautiful. The tree is just growing, growing, growing. But then what happens that surprised everyone is the brain begins to prune itself. You start carving away some of those leaves, some of the smaller branches, even some of the larger branches. And the reason for the pruning is to specialize the brain. While the child is developing in ways that are really generalized, learning everything they can about everything they can, an adolescent is going to begin to find their passion, to actually find things they like, things they really love doing, and to drive their development in that way. So pruning is actually a use it or lose it principle underneath it. That if you don't use something, you're going to lose it. So if you like sports or like dancing or like music, do those things so you continue to establish those circuits. The second thing that happens in the remodeling adolescent brain is myelin formation. Myelin is a healthy sheath that allows connected neurons to communicate with each other in a much more effective way. How? It's 100 times faster, the signal that's sent down a neuron to communicate with another neuron, 100 times faster, and after it fires off, it's 30 times shorter, the resting period that happens. 30 times 100 is 3,000. So when you've put down myelin, you've made your neurons communicate 3,000 times more effectively. That's a great thing. Now, the great thing too is that you as an adolescent can actually use the focus of your attention to be aware of your emotions, aware of other people, to be engaging in activities, to be doing things with your thoughts that actually reinforce the parts of your brain you want to hold on to. So the good news about the remodeling story is that a field called neuroplasticity, how the brain responds to experience, shows us that what you do with your mind can change the activity and therefore the structure of your brain. So if you then come up with the statement that the ultimate goal of brain remodeling is to make an integrated brain, to differentiate areas, that's the pruning, and myelinate them, that's the linkage. When you increase differentiation and linkage, you make the brain more integrated. And an integrated brain is the pathway toward well-being. And you can do mind sight exercises. These are exercises that increase insight. And
I'm just going to pause it there. It's almost over anyways, but I think it's so cool for adolescents to see that too. And it's so powerful for them to understand what's happening in their brain. So recently I got to work with a grade 7 class, and we made the tree out of actual branches and talked about all the things that they learned when they were younger, and how they just they have to learn everything from eating to crawling to everything. And then now they have this, it's so powerful for them that they get to decide where they focus their attention. So we chatted about maybe they used to play soccer because their parents enrolled them in soccer, but that's not their passion. So they're kind of pruning away those things that aren't as relevant for them, and they get to focus on their passion and who they want to be. We talked too about like the different emotions that they want to experience more and the type of characteristics they want to have. And those are the things that they get to focus on. So I think adolescents, teenagers get a bad rap for being um, not making good decisions and hormonal, but it's actually such an amazing stage. And I think they need to hear that from us just as even more than they hear all the other stuff. So here's the brain changes. We're not going to get to go super deep in all of them, but this is kind of what's happening for our kiddos right now. So this is coming from that Dan Siegel book, Brainstorm, which is, I highly recommend everybody that has a teenager or works with teenagers to read that book, because it's incredible. But these are kind of the 4 major changes that are happening, so that we're shifting away from that oatmeal that our dad is making us in the morning. So novelty seeking is one, social engagement, creative exploration, and emotional intensity. I would say that's probably the biggest one in my house right now with my teenagers. But each of these changes is necessary to create the important shifts that happen in our thinking, our feeling, interacting, and decision making during adolescence. So they're incredibly important and they're incredibly powerful. So the first one I'm just going to touch on is the novelty seeking. So this just is that increased drive for reward. So oftentimes it looks like maybe they're not making great decisions, but they're motivated to try new things and feel life more fully. They're getting now to decide what they're interested and passionate about. So it creates a more engaging life for them. So of course, there's going to be beautiful upsides of that we get to see. But then of course, there's going to be some downsides, and there's going to be risk involved, and they might make poor decisions and they might get hurt, but it's kind of navigating them into balancing those things, right? We don't want there to be so risky that it's something that maybe could end their life or seriously injure them, but they also have to take risks so that they can feel engaged, and that's how they learn. So although it's hard for us as the parents, especially this aspect of novelty seeking, it's really important. Social engagement, of course, it's a really big time when our kids are moving a little bit away from us and more towards friends. It doesn't mean that they need us any less, but they're turning more to their peers, which is actually really healthy for them to be doing, even though it might break our hearts a little bit. But again, it's moving from that oatmeal in the morning, or they're going to be living with us when they're 50, and we don't actually really want that at all. So lots of upsides, of course, with social engagement, but there's downsides again. So it's just balancing those two things. Creative exploration. So that out of the box thinking. I don't generally work in a professional setting with older kids, with teenagers, mostly with younger kids, but I've had a little bit of experience this year. And it's so amazing to see how their brain works and the abstract reasoning that they have that I don't always see with the little ones. But creative exploration, again, is a really, really important piece. And this one I'm speaking personally more about is the emotional intensity. So again, I always blame that on hormones, but it actually is something that is happening in their brain. So I'm sure you may have heard of the lid flip, but I know in my house, we're noticing a lot of those big reactions to smaller situations that they didn't always have those big reactions to. So we won't have time to watch those videos, but they're both wonderful videos. So we're going to put them in the chat. And then I highly recommend having a look at that, especially the Dan Siegel one, because it really explains what's happening in their brain when they're experiencing a strong emotion. And everybody experiences this. And I think teenagers need to realize that too. Well, all kids need to realize that too. And it's really difficult, especially with a teenager, if their lid is flipped, they're not able to reason. So trying to give them consequences or talk reasonably with them when they're in that state of emotional intensity does not work. So we will get more intense and they will get more intense and it just snowballs. So I think the biggest thing with teenagers is just like bringing ourselves down so that they can match us. So even though we talk about like co-regulation when kids are young, this is another time of their life when we still have to practice that because we can't reason with each other if we're not in the prefrontal cortex, if we're not in our thinking brain. So helping them to understand that, I'll even say that to my kids, like your lid is flipped right now. So you need to take some time away. I need to take some time away. And then when we're calm and reasonable, then we can come back and chat about something. And at this age, they can understand that. So I think that in my personal experience has been a really, really big learning curve for us. But now that we both kind of understand what's happening, we know how to handle when our lids are flipped, and then we can come back together again. Sorry, I'm going to try and play all the videos. There we go. This actually, I just watched this morning and I just put it in this morning because in my master's course this week, we were talking about the mysteries of the adolescent brain, which was perfect timing. So this whole video again is really great, but our time is short and I want to make sure that we have time for questions. But I just want to share kind of her last little thought because it just, again, helped remind me, just helped me to kind of shift my thinking with regards to teenagers. So I'm just going to fast forward it right near the end. And I just want to give us a little food for thought before we head into questions.
Secondary school education. And yet this is a period of life where the brain is particularly adaptable and malleable. It's a fantastic opportunity for learning and creativity. So what's sometimes seen as the problem with adolescence, heightened risk-taking, poor impulse control, self-consciousness, shouldn't be stigmatized. It actually reflects changes in the brain that provide an excellent opportunity for education and social development. Thank you.
Sorry, let me pause. I'm just going to re-say what she said because I wrote that down because I was like, yes, that's exactly what this is. So what's sometimes seen as a problem with adolescence, heightened risk-taking, poor impulse control, self-consciousness, which basically sums up both of my kids in a nutshell, shouldn't be stigmatized. It actually reflects changes in the brain that provide an excellent opportunity for education and social development. So just a really good mind shift for us as parents. Okay, so neuroscience finds that our brains never stop growing, which is an idea called neuroplasticity. And what sparks that growth and what keeps us young are these things: the emotional, passion, social engagement, friendships, novelty, creative outlets, which is exactly the essence of adolescence. So we actually have a lot to learn from our teenagers. So I just want to give you a minute just to think about that. So instead of thinking them of those maybe preconceived ideas that we had coming in, what do you think adolescence actually has to teach us as adults? So if you want to even pop that in the chat, you can. But we can't stop the waterfall, which is basically probably what we feel like we're in right now, but we can learn to direct the course. So thinking of this stage as an amazing stage that we get to help, we get front row seat, we get to help support our kids through, because this stage right now is actually so fundamental in how they're going to be as adults. So we get to play such an important role for that. We don't have to just get them through it, but we actually get to support them through that. So I think I did it in time and everything. So if there was any questions that anybody wanted to ask, I think are we putting that Padlet up, Kim?
Yeah, I'll put that. So, oh my gosh, every time I talk, I have a thank you so much, Jill. I really appreciated the positivity that you embedded throughout. And as a former junior high teacher, I certainly saw all of those in action. But I do think and wonder, what is it that you, as moms, as grandparents, as aunts, as caregivers, that really wonder about, now that you maybe learned a little bit more about how the adolescent brain works, what are you left wondering? Because there's lots of conversations that I'm a part of about, what do I do, right?
Mhm.
How do I support my teen? So I'll just pause there to see if there's any questions. We do have a Padlet, and Jill, if you don't mind, just stopping your sharing. I'll pull
You
up the
bet.
Padlet
Yeah.
just to show. Thank you. That's awesome.
Mhm.
So we do have, oops, I didn't mean to do that. We do have a Padlet created where we thought for our parent conversation club, you can anonymously add by just clicking on the green circle in the bottom right-hand corner. There's a little pen, and if you click on it, it gives you the option to write a question, a wondering, and I even put, if you have a compliment, to yourself or your daughter or something you want to share. I thought this would be a nice way to collect those. Certainly you can add things in the chat, but sometimes it's nice to have a place to go that your name isn't associated with it.
Yeah. And maybe even adding on there too, like what do you think teenagers have to teach us as adults?
Yes, definitely. So I want to conclude, because Jill did such a nice job of pulling this together in such a tight time frame.
That's hard to do. There's so many more things to share, but another day.
Yeah, but like a taster, right? So one thing I'll ask you, Jill, as a parent of girls, teen girls, what is one kind of ongoing struggle, or maybe friction that you have that occurs, that you're finding that flipping the lid comment you mentioned, like, we've agreed, we're flipping our lids here, we need some more time. Do you have any examples or common situations that you would see or know that that's been helpful for you?
Well, both my girls are like complete opposites of each other, like complete opposites. So one of them, our biggest struggle as parent-child relationship is, don't know how to say this politely, but like it's sometimes hard to navigate dramatics, if you know what I mean. Like there's
Mm,
lots
yeah.
of, there might be a tiny bit of a sore throat, but then that turns into a giant like situation where I can't go to school, and where it's we're not always sure um what to believe, and we feel like we have to push that one, let's just say. And the other one we have to like push to listen to their body because they're just so different. So those are kind of where we get into conflict a lot, where one, we're pushing, like trying to motivate, get to school, do all those things. And the other one will flip her lid because she can't go to school because she's sick and we don't want her to spread it. So they're just so very different, but
Mm,
their reactions are often the same, even though the situations are different.
right.
But their personalities are so, so different. So certainly one we experience more lid flipping with than the other right now, but then it can flip. It can flip and flop a lot. But with both of them, I think the biggest thing has just been teaching them this, like teaching them
Yeah.
what's going on in their own body and listening to their body. So actually both those situations is listening to their body.
Yeah.
And yeah, just navigating, there'll be times like on a Sunday, for example, with one of my daughters, Monday mornings are really hard. It's
Yeah.
hard for her to get to school. So it's a battle in the morning. So now it's like, okay, we know that's going to be the situation. What does Sunday look like? And having those conversations. Well, you're going to struggle tomorrow morning. So what can you do to set yourself up for success? So
Yeah.
we're trying to kind of like navigate so it's not big explosions all the time, but helping them realize what's happening. That makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And I really like too how you were alluding to the fact of choice too. And I do find in our work with Glow, we do embed that a lot in our theme conversations around as parents. It can be really great to give your daughter a choice, right? Like, to kind of sometimes minimize that, flip the lid.
Yes, totally.
And that's not just females, I realize, but
Oh, no, no. I think it happens, yeah, earlier with females because of, like I said, the puberty happens a lot earlier with girls. So I feel like we experience that sooner than with the boys. But yeah, choices are huge. And just I think the piece that I personally was missing was that I wasn't educating them about that, like that self-awareness piece. That's what I'm like really passionate about now, because if they don't have that self-awareness, it's really hard to manage emotions if they don't understand them and what's happening. So yeah, I thought it was like, oh, it's hormones or it's this or that, but it's actually so much deeper than that. So once they know that, I think that's a really important piece that I was missing, was I wasn't teaching them about that. So that's
yeah.
been a big game changer.
Okay, and that's a great segue to wrap up this parent conversation club session, because our next one is on self-awareness of emotions on May 29th. So I think that was a great kind of, sparking interest in that topic of how do you build your daughter's self-awareness to help with those 4 areas that you talked about today. Do you mind just repeating those again? So it was emotional, and I just thought
Novelty.
those are, yeah, those are the 4 different elements you
Well,
spoke
those
of.
are the brain changes that are happening
Yes.
in
Okay.
adolescence.
Yeah.
So the next session will be mostly focusing on like that emotional intensity. That's a big
Okay.
piece of self-awareness.
Awesome.
But
Okay. That
yeah.
makes sense. Emotional
Yeah.
intensity. Okay. All right. So if you're in this space and you would love to ask a question, we'll just pause for a minute. I would hate anyone to leave and not have that opportunity. So I'll just pause and see. And I have looked at the chat, and I will take a quick look at the Padlet just to make sure. Oh, I do have in the Padlet, and I'm so glad I did this. I'm wondering how to help my daughter navigate through high school
Yeah,
friendships. Okay. And there's a second one too. I'm concerned about the impact of social media. Yeah, social media is one we want to offer. So
totally.
thank you so much for that post.
Yeah.
Jill, do you want to speak to the wondering how to help my daughter navigate through high school friendships? Any
Oh,
tips or?
I wish there was a handbook for that too, because I'm also dealing with that. I honestly, I think in even just in my master's course, I'm like, I just paid $8,000 to hear this over and over again, which I think we already know, but Relationships are the most important thing through all of this. So the relationship that we can have with them is the most important thing. Any strategy in the world that we can learn doesn't happen if we don't have a connection first. So I'm just speaking as a parent right now, but my biggest thing too is just I am always that like safe landing place. So my daughter that's in high school doesn't share a lot. She doesn't talk a lot about high school friendships, but of course you can kind of tell when they're coming home and something is off. So it's just like being that safe spot. So it might just be like with us, it'll just be like a physical touch. Like sometimes I know that she just needs a hug. And if she's ready to talk about it, she will. But I think too, it's like it's part of the process and it's so hard. I'm in this too, where it's so hard to see them struggling with that or not being treated the way they should be. But I kind of look back to my teenage years and it was also very similar. So
Mm.
it is part of this process of what's happening in their adolescent brain, and I think it's just being the support for them as they navigate it. I don't know
Mhm.
if it's, like, the perfect answer, but, um, yeah, I don't know that there's a manual for that for sure, and the social media thing, I think, goes hand in hand with that, and that is a huge challenge, and I'm actually doing a research project on that, so hopefully I'll have some great things to share at another time, but, yeah, because it's different. Their friendships are different, I think, than what we
Yeah.
navigated in high school because they do have social media, and it's you can say what you want behind a screen, and it is different. So, hopefully I'll have lots of great information to share about that, but right now that's also something that I'm interested in learning about as a parent.
Yeah, great. Yeah, great answer. And that just being ready to listen when they want to talk, right? That's one other thing is sometimes you're like, okay, like I know you're upset. Can we talk about this now? And sometimes it's, they'll be ready to talk when they're ready. And we always talk about driving in the car where you're facing
Yes.
forward and right, there's not that intense eye contact or so, but yeah,
Yeah.
great question. Those both are fantastic. And please follow suit if you've watched this as a recording to add to the Padlet and let us know some of your wonderings and questions because it's certainly going to drive future sessions. So on that note, Jill and I didn't even plan to be polka dotted together, but we are. So maybe it'll happen next time, but we hope to see all of you at the Self-Awareness of Emotions Parent Conversation Club session on May 29th. And thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having us, Kim.
Okay, take care.
Good night,
Bye.
everyone.